r/askreddit. Have you ever encountered true evil? How? I've told this story before, about meeting a murderer. Was a journalist on weekend duty. Got called out to a story. Guy claims his car was hijacked with his 2-year-old son in it. I met him at the police station. He seemed devastated. I was devastated. I mean, I'd done plenty of grisly crime stories, but a missing kid is next level awful. Next day I had my day off. The regular crime reporter called me. They'd arrested the dad and found the little boy's body at a rubbish dump. He did it out of revenge for his wife cheating. It still bothers me to this day how I could have felt so much sympathy for this man. I shook his hand. I cried with him. I'm usually very good at picking up when someone is off. Just goes to show you, true evil disguises itself very well. That's crazy. Poor boy, I hate when parents take out their anger at the other with their child. The biggest psychopath I ever met was an extremely likable, charismatic guy. Seemed genuinely nice when you talked to him. You could only tell he was a psychopath by his actions. The dude destroyed everything he touched. Would relentlessly steal from people. I don't think he was particularly violent, as far as I know, but he had no scruples about taking advantage of other people's kindness to get what he wanted. Kindness which was never in short supply for him since everyone liked him so much, until they found themselves living with him for a while, which was often because he was essentially homeless and schmozzed his way into sleeping on other people's couches. The point is, you won't always know if there's something off about someone. Last I heard, he was being a sugar baby. He's straight BTW, for an old lonely rich gay guy. Back in 2011 my uncle down in Mexico had got kidnapped by one of the cartels. They gave my entire family on my dad's side a random $10,000 and we would get him back. My dad called in people who owed him money and managed to get the 10 gram. He sent it down to the family down south and they paid the ransom for my uncle. All we got in return was my uncle's lifeless body. Wow, I'm sorry this happened to you and your family. That is horrible to hear, and I'm sorry for your loss. Unfortunately, lots of organized criminals involved in kidnapping and ransom kill their prisoners even after receiving the ransom money. One reason why the US doesn't negotiate with terrorists. Heverine, I'm sorry for your uncle. A few years ago a friend of mine was going through a nasty divorce. Like really bad. He came to visit me one evening as I was getting off of work. When I sat down with him he just seemed off, like a completely different person than the man I had known before. Blank stare in his eyes, no smiling, anger behind everything he said. I chalked it up to the divorce and just thought to myself that he would get better when everything calmed down. I told my wife when I got home about seeing him and she agreed with my assessment. I bumped into his ex-wife and some friends a few days later at another work event. She was actually out celebrating their divorce being finalized I think and she invited my wife and I over to a house party. That would be the last time I saw her. My wife and I ended up not going to the house party but the ex-husband did show up. He killed 9 people, including his ex-wife. Edit. This couple had been known for throwing parties prior to their divorce. That stopped when they began divorce proceedings of course. The party was not a celebration of their divorce. It was a Dallas Cowboys watch party and it was her attempt at trying to do something she saw as normal after such a difficult time. I also believe this is why he focused on that. Jesus, sorry to hear that. Glad you didn't go to the party. I hate to ask, but I'm very curious if there were any hints about what pushed him over the edge. What was he angry about, or focusing on, if I may ask? Was that in Plano, Texas in 2017? I think I remember that happening. In Iraq there was a family that we would go see every other week or so while on patrol. We would ask them how things are going and if there was anything they needed us to do. They were a respected family in the area and did a lot to build their community to defend against the violence committed by the insurgency. It was a big family, lots of kids, 3 wives. They were good people just trying to better their community. Their house just happened to be one road that was kind of a border between Al-Qaeda controlled territory and coalition controlled territory. One day we were patrolling the road as we did several times per week. And we came across a hole that had been blown into the road making it impassable by vehicle. We turned around and got back onto the road a few miles further down and encountered another hole just like the first. The holes were about 2 miles apart and effective created a corridor for Al Qaeda fighters to cross the road more freely. We dismounted to get to the family's house. Everyone was on edge. Once we arrived at the house, it was immediately noticeable that something was wrong. It was silent and there was a smell surrounding the house. Inside was the most terrible thing I have ever seen. The entire family was gathered into the central room of the house where they were all tortured, raped and murdered. There was maybe a half inch of blood that was congealing on the floor. If you looked at the scene, you could tell the order that it all happened. The father was killed last, the daughters were unclothed and laying face down. The mother and baby were killed with one bullet at the same time. By the time we had arrived, they had all been dead for 2 or 3 days already. I think about this every day and I've had to stop to cry 3 times just to write it out. Edit. I just want to thank this community for its support. The amount of positive feedback has been pretty incredible. I do not want to perpetuate the broken veteran stereotype. While this is one of several painful memories that I carry with me, I have so many more of seeing the compassion that humans are capable of as well. Yes, there was a time that I struggled and I struggled a lot, just as others have, but I have sought help and today I am doing well. I saw some stuff to man, nothing like that though. I don't know how long it's been for you, but it does usually get better with time and help. Don't let society or pride or any of that crap stop you from getting help, if you're ready for it. I waited, almost cost me everything. I'm sorry to read about your experience and hope writing it helped you in a way. Your experience made me think of my grandpa in World War II. He was in Normandy patrolling in France and eventually got to Holland where he helped in their liberation. He rarely talked about it and was never able to sleep a full night, having a lot of night terrors. He mentioned unspeakable things here and there that I was able to piece together. Each time there were Nazis in movies or shows we would watch, he would either get up and leave the room or constantly punch his fist in his hand. When I was a boy, I had a wicked stepmother who reveled in beating me. She would beat me when my father was not present, threatened to kill my brother if I said anything. She would use whatever objects were convenient to beat me with. Wooden spoon, hairbrush, dowel rod, rolling pin, her hands, fists, belt, whatever. One time she used a serpentine belt. She'd hit me where it wouldn't be visible when my father wasn't around. At one point, she had me drop my pants and underwear and then beat me until I nearly passed out. I jerked, tensed out of pain and kicked off of her lap and kicked her in the face. She proceeded to pick me up by my leg and beat my balls with a wooden spoon. I'm not sure if she counted as evil, but she certainly counted as sadistic and vindictive. Edit. Holy shit. This blew up. Answering questions. 8:11 PM the 22nd of August 2019 CST. Edit 2. Typos. Sorry, I made this post via mobile originally. Didn't think this would blow up like it did. I'll elaborate some more. Answer general questions. As soon as my father found out about the hell that I had been going through, my sibling didn't go through quite the same because the vile bitch found out quick that he was big enough to fight back. My father filed for divorce, and it was an emergency divorce. She was gone shortly thereafter. According to reports I have heard over the years, life has not treated this woman well. By last report in 1999, she had aged 30 years over the last decade, and her bio son was already going in and out of juvie. Karma has done what karma needed to do to make things fair. I have adjusted well, and though I have never actually sought counseling for it, I found that talking about it with close and personal friends and family was enough to heal. I still believe in properly executed corporal punishment, as in a few swats on the butt, and an explanation as to why the punishment was dealt. If anybody is curious, and don't feel like perusing comments, I have only ever had to raise my hands to my kids when they have put themselves or others directly in harm's way via stupidity. One does not run out into the road without looking both ways without getting spanked. The alternative is no little baby Joey, don't do that right before they get hit by a fucking bus because they don't comprehend what the danger really is yet. Yeah, no, that's plain and simple pure evil. Like really bad evil. My mom beat me too. When my dad wasn't around. Except she was my biological mom and I'm a girl. She beat me so hard when I was 6 I was limping. She also purposefully slashed my nipple with her fingernail when I was 8. People who beat kids are evil. My kids went to visit their mom in the UK on a court-ordered visit. I knew what was going to happen, but couldn't prevent the visit. Sure enough, rather than put them on a plane back to me in the USA, she went on the run with them and her boyfriend. I got a lot of help from the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the US State Department, and the Scottish government paid all my legal fees over there. During the 5 months she had the kids, she tried to brainwash them. She told them if they came back to me, I would allow them to be molested and kill them. This was relentless. My son was incredibly strong and refused to believe her or cooperate. They were 13 at the time, but my daughter was much easier to manipulate. I really don't know for certain that they weren't physically abused, but a lot of the stuff she accused me of was things she and her then boyfriend, now husband, did to the children. I had to fly to Scotland to appear in a trial. I walked out of the courthouse at 9 PM on a Friday night with the children. Normal process for these cases is to have a designated handover 2 or 3 days later, but the child psychologist who interviewed us all was positive that my ex-wife would kill the children, and the judge agreed. I got them back in the clothes they stood in. I have no doubt she would indeed have killed them rather than hand them over to me. 5 years later, she has no contact with the children, their choice. They have anxiety and depression, but are doing remarkably well. They are high school seniors now, and they make me proud every day. Good job, Dad. My birth mom was abusive. She beat my brother mercilessly and let her boyfriend molest him. She ignored all of us daughters. Went days without eating. Yikes. That's multi-level horror. Hope you all are good now. There was a kid in my 6th grade class who loved designing his own custom shanks and then stabbing people in the arm or back with them. He had a look of pure joy on his face when he saw that he drew blood and caused suffering to another human. He was only suspended for a week the first 2 times he did this before they finally kicked him out of school after the 3rd time. How did this kid not get the shit beaten out of him? I get that he's shank kid, but did no one he stabbed have any friends? I used to work with a woman years ago who was estranged from her husband. The day before her husband was going to take their daughter to Disney World, she smothered her daughter with a pillow and then tried, unsuccessfully, to kill herself. I worked with a guy in Ontario who was always posting on Facebook that he just adopted new puppy like every 4 or 5 months. He adopted them from all different shelters and people. Had to have about 8 or 9 at one point. We went to his house for some reason and there were no dogs. No signs of dogs, no toys, no food bowls, etc. We asked about the puppies and he just offhandedly pointed to the backyard, which we noticed was full of little mounds, and said they all were sick and died. Guess he just didn't have good luck with animals. The way he said it was cold. The CSPCA investigated him and tested the remains. He was putting small amounts of his own homemade poison in the dog food and conducting his own little LD50 test. I haven't, but I think my GF has. She works at a preschool daycare. Ages of children vary from infant to 5. She teaches the 3-year-olds in her part of the building. She told me that there is this one 3-year-old girl that is just a heathen. She literally only wants to hurt people. One day she got in trouble for hitting kids on the head with pots and pans. They use these in the sand pit for fun. She brought the little girl inside to talk to her, and the entire time she is just not listening. Mid-sentence the little girl looks at my GF dead in the eyes and says, "Can you let me go outside so I can't hit more people?" The next day she was expelled because she just kept hitting kids in the head with pots and pans. Laughing about it. How do you get expelled from a preschool? How do you get expelled from a preschool? Probably by hitting kids with pans and pots. I felt like my aunt was pretty evil, and she was a kindergarten teacher no less. She pulled my arm out of its socket one time when I was 4 and she was helping me cross the road. I visited her when I was 16 and every opportunity she got she would whisper in my ear, "You are worthless. You are nothing, and just keep walking." The visit ended with her trying to strangle me after I took issue with her trying to force feed my brother Ginger, and that was the last time my family spoke to her. I remember fantasizing about getting back at her in some way for a while, but then moved on with my life and grew up. Years later, she was being her typical self with my uncle, her brother, and berating him, calling him worthless, and he shot her in the head, killing her. It was a real tragedy for the family as he shot himself afterwards as well, but I certainly have not missed my aunt. I told this story on Reddit yesterday, so I'll keep this shorter. I had a friend that would threaten to kill herself every night and tell me it was my fault if she did it and everyone would know because I didn't love her as more than friends. It ruined me. And then she started dating my best friend and their relationship was volatile and abusive. Everything she said was lies. I believe she was truly a psychopath. When I was about 12, I was part of the best soccer squad at my local soccer club. It was quite high level and had to work a whole year to get my spot in the starting 11. Was a great feeling to make it. Unfortunately, the kid whose spot I had taken was the coach assistant's son. When we received info about the start of the next season, he gave my father wrong info, which meant that I showed 2 weeks later than anybody else. I got punished by being sent in the B squad, lost all love for soccer in a few months and stopped playing indefinitely. Years later I realized that it was a mistake, but I had left the game for so long that I never believed I could make anything happen anymore. This dude stole a kid's dream just so his kid could play more regularly. What a fucking cunt. The first boyfriend I ever had, we were both 16. He was a pathological liar and a sociopath. He slowly became possessive and controlling, wanted to be together constantly, would accuse me of wearing things that were too revealing, isolated me from my friends. When I tried to break up with him, he threatened to rape me and kill my dog. He pushed me out of a slowly moving car while his grandmother was driving. I was dumb as a box of rocks and had no self-esteem, so I didn't know any better. I nearly changed schools. My parents put me in therapy among other things. He ruined the first 2 years of high school for me. Over 20 years later he sent me a message on Facebook asking me how I was, like we were old fucking pals. I didn't respond. Maybe he changed as an adult, but I seriously doubt it. I found out he died a couple years ago. He was involved in a crime involving his young daughter and I'm pretty sure he was facing prison time. I honestly think the world is better off without him in it. In my job I have to interview convicted criminals for court purposes. They have committed all kinds of crimes: rape, murder, domestic violence, child abuse. Some don't talk about their conduct, but some do. Most have no concept, or show no understanding or acceptance of how evil they are, which is pretty scary. They justify, minimize, blame others. I have an easy time putting them out of my mind after all these years at my job. But I also have to talk to the victims of their heinous crimes, and that is the worst part of my job. Hard to erase their pain from my brain. I know the girl who falsely accused my friend of rape, tried to get him kicked out of university and deported, and ruined his reputation, because her boyfriend found out about their one-night stand. I read the letters she wrote. The things she called him were appalling. It made me sick. Luckily he had saved their text conversations, and her story didn't hold up when cross-referenced with them. He still isn't the same. He had been recovering from depression, which made a swift and terrible comeback due to her. He has sworn to never sleep with someone he doesn't know again. When I see her, nice and smiling with her friends, I can't help but wonder how someone could be capable of such a vile action, just because she didn't want to own up to the fact that she cheated. The sheer uncaring for the well-being of others, the absolute lack of empathy, and the disrespect to actual victims astounds me. If she had gotten her way, his life would be practically over. Also, she could pretend to be a better person. I have never hated someone in my life, and I don't hate her. She doesn't even deserve that, but I wish people like her wouldn't exist. Yeah. When I was 16-17, I would go to someone's house to hang out, and they live relatively close to our high school's park. Sometimes there would be this guy at the park. He was a nice guy, a little too nice to me personally, but nonetheless, a nice guy. He would come up to me and we would talk, and he would ask if I wanted to hang out with him and his friends. I would tell him no, my mom is expecting me home because stranger danger. Turns out my stranger danger vibe was correct because I found out he raped 2 underage girls. Yeah, dodge a bullet. I've spent a lot of time volunteering in a prison, as a teacher. Every one of my students are good people who made bad decisions and are paying their debt. I've never thought of them as evil. Except for one student. Very intelligent man. Serving time for killing his wife in a particularly heinous way. In casual conversation, he refers to her as his ex. Like, my ex and I went to Greece once. I was shocked the first time I heard him do it. She's not your ex-wife, man. She didn't divorce you. You chopped her to pieces. Closest thing to casual evil I've ever seen. About 10 years ago I was walking in the city when I saw a motorcade of police stop in front of the courthouse. Tall, classy guy in handcuffs comes out, escorted by police. Gives me a wink and a smile. Confident. I thought it was just some other finance mogul who took it too far. Saw him in the news a week later. Guy stabbed and killed his 2 young children in a bathtub to get back at his cheating ex. I don't know about true evil, but my stepfather-in-law is a truly horrible person. My husband was diagnosed as autistic quite young. Stepfather said it was BS and just beat the shit out of him. Just beatings would have been one thing, but he got downright petty. He would purposely figure out the foods he had sensory issues with and cook only those foods. That turned into their entire menu. He claimed that they were his favorite foods, but this favoritism only occurred after he realized my husband didn't like them. He also would go out of his way to make sure my husband didn't get things he wanted, even if it meant eating more cake so my husband had less. When my husband's teachers suggested special education, he refused and just beat him more to try to get him to have good grades. All bruises were easily explained because my husband liked skateboarding. He was determined that autism was just bullshit and that it was nothing a good whooping couldn't fix. The final blow, the truly shitty thing, was the birth of his son. When my husband was in his late teens, his mother and stepfather had a baby. The baby was diagnosed as autistic. He is one of those Austin parents now and fully advocates for autism awareness. He still refuses to acknowledge his stepson's autism and just ignores it. I haven't encountered it, but my aunt's side of the family has 2 brothers that are corrupted policemen in China. While on his deathbed, the father's ankles were twisted in attempt to get the inheritance money quicker. She doesn't talk to her brothers anymore and cut contact after the father passed. Fuck those 2. I hope some sick sadistic shit happens to them when they least expect it. I used to be on the board of a dog rescue organization. True evil is out there and it walks on 2 legs.